So it's not really something that I'm going to recommend for everybody. Certainly not right off the bat. I would like to have my clients pay for search term data that I have more control over before I just open up the floodgates and let Google go ahead and figure it out what's relevant over time. Now, is that always a horrible strategy? No. There's plenty of VC backed businesses that are just ultra aggressive. They need to spend this huge amount of money to get as much data as possible, even if understanding that maybe 20-30+% of that just could be total crap. But they're in it for the long run, the long game, right? They're playing the long game of we're willing to bid more aggressively on terms that maybe our competitors are not, because there might be some opportunities there, because we're willing to bid on those things that our competitors are not, and therefore gain a competitive advantage long term, because then we can take some of those search terms and create exact match keywords, exact phrase match keywords that maybe our competition wouldn't really consider because they seem a little bit more generic, a little bit more research oriented, etc. So there are some strategic reasons that you would utilize broad match, though it's just not going to be for most people, at least to start. Is it something that I'll experiment with in some cases? Absolutely. It's not like I would just never ever do it. It's just one of those things where, like, if it's appropriate as a means for testing, as a means for, as he's kind of talking about here, like a research tool, yeah, I think there is a place for that. Could you get something similar by building out an extensive phrase match keyword list? Potentially, not all the time, because there is always going to be this evolving universe of search terms that your phrase match may or may not capture. So those are all things to consider. I do think that, again, there is a place for broad match. Now, going back to his points here of, like, having to build out negative keyword lists, and it just seems like it's sort of a slog of just constantly adding negatives when you have broad match keywords going. That's absolutely true. Now, the difference between Google Ads and Bing, like I already talked about, I mean, that's, if you need to be adding, talking about negatives, if you need to be adding negatives to trying broad match on Bing ads, yeah, you're going to be working a lot and getting a lot of stuff. I mean, I've had this take months and months of just daily, weekly, huge amounts of negatives. Even when we're just going through adding negatives and phrase match, it just can take a long time because that relevancy matching is not as great on that search engine. So, Bing, yes, a lot more work. It may not be the thing I would try anytime soon for most businesses. I would certainly rely way more heavily on exact match and phrase match for Bing. Now, Google, there is something to consider here. That yes, there might be some work in terms of the negative keywords. Some businesses and some products will have less trouble than others in terms of Google being able to find relevant traffic with broad match. Others not so much. It is also highly, highly dependent on your broad match keyword. Are you just putting in, like, let's say that you sell bicycles? Are you just putting in bicycles broad match? Well, in that case, my goodness, like, Google's going to just, you would think it can understand looking at the ad landing page of where you're sending the traffic that, like, you're selling bicycles, but Google will try all types of stuff. I still see it to this day. So while it's sophisticated, you certainly need to, it can be sophisticated. You need to be, again, feeding it really good signals in order for it to become more sophisticated over time. So the most common practice for that is to build, like, long tail, again, like 4+ word broad match keywords that have some commercial intent. It's usually a really good start. If you're like a service industry, or you're like, B2B SaaS or something, you're going to be including things like application, or like services, or solutions, tools, etc. You're going to want to include that along with whatever the service offering is in terms of a broad match keyword. You want that to be, again, generally like 4+ words as a broad match keyword. That will give Google a little bit more precise of, like, a target that you're looking for in terms of what keywords that you want it to match to. If you keep it really open by having only 1 or 2 words in there, you could find a lot of issues with it finding very relevant traffic. That doesn't always work that way, but certainly if you're going to start, make it longer tail broad match keywords to start. If you're e-commerce, it really applies the same way. Obviously, you would just take, if you're selling leggings, it's going to be like, XL leggings for sale, or like pink colored leggings for women. Like that would, whatever is appropriate for the products or whatever is in the products that you have in that ad group. Those are the types of broad match keywords, and you'd feed a bunch in there. Look, there's no like perfect number of keywords, or whether does it need to be less than 20 or does it need to be only one per. I'm not a huge fan of SCAGs anymore. I used to be a huge proponent of that, single keyword ad groups for the layman out there. It's not something in most cases you're going to utilize. There are use cases, but that's a whole topic for another video. But for the case of broad match keywords, I would highly suggest also, if you're going to be testing broad match keywords, put them in, if not a separate ad group from your exact match, phrase match keywords, and a separate campaign. And then make sure that you're negating anything that you really, like a search term that you really want to show in the exact and the phrase match keyword campaign. Make sure you negate those from the broad match campaign if you're going to do that campaign level segmentation. There is pros and cons to both of those approaches, but it's just something to consider. So another thing with broad match that you really need to consider is, if you've run exact and phrase match for a very long amount of time, and every business that's going to mean something different, because what I mean really is how much data and historical data that you have that you feel confident about. Like there's a lot of conversions, those conversion tracking was accurate, you were selling similar products at that time, that the conversion history, etc. Well, in that case, and you're really looking for something to experiment, some way to expand the account. You feel like maybe based on using keyword research tools that there are some keywords that your phrase and keyword exact match keywords are not going after. Well, I would prefer personally trying to throw them in as exact or phrase match. However, here's the thing. You might not be able to target them because you might get this, you might have seen this in your account, this low search volume keyword status, which essentially said there's not enough, as Google is saying, there's not enough search volume on a regular basis to show this keyword. Now that can change, and I've seen definitely cases where it gives you that status, and then something happens in terms of seasonality around that search term, or just even outside of seasonality where it still gets impressions, even though Google's saying it's not going to show. If that's the case, you may have to try expanding and testing some broad match keywords to try to get some of those terms that you see some decent amounts of volume. Again, if you're in expansion mode and you really just want to try to capture as much of the sort of search market share around your products or services as possible, it's an approach that you can take. In terms of how much more intelligent it's gotten over time, I mean, it has gotten more intelligent for sure. Of course, I mean, Google has more data. It's a data company mostly, right? So it has gotten better. I would not say it's a one size fits all. I definitely would not start most accounts, like I mentioned earlier, unless you're like VC backed, you just hyper aggressive and you understand that you're going to be taking a loss probably in the beginning, but you're in it for the long game, so you can really just try to see the entire search universe around your products and services, including a lot of crap that's out there. Then on Google specifically, not on Bing, it might be something you try. Otherwise, you probably don't want to be starting a new campaign or a new account with broad match keywords. I would certainly lean more to exact and or phrase match keywords. I mean, yeah, I mean, even if it's a product or service that Google has a lot of history around in its advertising platform, or just a lot of search volume, it's going to have a better time, easier time at figuring out what's relevant. It doesn't mean it's going to have commercial intent though. So it's something to really keep in mind. If you've ever run Performance Max before, you'll see some generic terms in there that actually get conversions. This is an approach to some degree of what you would get from Broad Match, except Performance Max is of course cross network if you're not doing a feed only campaign style of Performance Max. A little bit different, and obviously Performance Max is not doing broad match keywords, it's doing dynamic search ads, so it's essentially crawling your page and determining which search terms are relevant based on whatever is on the pages that it's scanning on your site. Yeah, again, Bing, I'm not really gonna mess around too much with broad match keywords on Microsoft. Exact and phrase can have issues, not so much exact match, but phrase match can still have a lot of issues. Especially dynamic search ads I've found as well. It can be good in some cases, not always, but again, in. Try it in your account if you feel like it makes sense for your business and your business goals. But yeah, not something I'm generally going to be starting with. And yeah, so I hope that helps. I'll see you in the next video.